We begin in West Africa, where 26 heads of state, among them leaders from Chad, Cote d'Ivoire and Morocco, are expected in Mali's capital, Bamako, for the inauguration of Mali's new president, Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta. The ceremony at a 55,000-seat stadium marks a new democratic era after months of internal chaos. CCTV's Maria Galang has more.
It's a new beginning for Mali. Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta, or IBK as he is popularly known, takes the reins of the West African nation, whose 16.3 million residents look forward to rebuilding the country. Leaders from neighboring Cote d'Ivoire, Morocco and Chad are among the 26 heads of state attending the much-anticipated inauguration, as well as French President François Hollande. Hollande is held in high regard by Malians. This mainly after France sent troops in January to help the military fight off an Islamist insurgency in the north. Keïta's landslide election victory in August was seen as pivotal to helping the West African nation regain stability. The country is attempting to recover from a military coup last year, followed by 18 months of political crisis. Keïta has pledged to create a strong and impartial state that will bring together all Malians.
My message to the president is for him to put an end to land grabbing, to put an end to politicians who take advantage of Malian people, to put an end to theft and corruption in our country.
Despite the country's recent setbacks, Malians from around the country are in solidarity. Artists from the north of the country, made up of traditional singers, poets and young rappers, put together their messages of peace, reconciliation and rebuilding, with an aim of unifying the country as IBK takes power.
This is the way to communicate for the young generation, so we try to modernize a little with the modern rap tradition. The rhythm is modern, but it's on a traditional music theme. We chose this to try and push our message through in a positive and more concrete manner.
Like many of their countrymen, some of these musicians from northern Mali were targeted by hardline Islamists bent on imposing Sharia or strict Islamic law. Concerts were banned in northern cities, clubs closed, instruments smashed and burnt, musicians harassed and forced to flee. But the success of the recent elections restored hope that Malians can once again live freely. Maria Galang, CCTV.
Now, Mali was once hailed as a beacon of democracy in West Africa, and that was until 2012 when a military coup and an Islamist insurgency in the north destabilized the country. Let's take a quick look at the challenges facing the nation that Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta will be looking to transform. Now, Mali's GDP is one of the lowest in the world, ranking at 180 out of 194 countries. 50% of the population live on $1.25 a day. The literacy rate is at 31%, with over half the population under the age of 18. However, Mali is a country rich in various natural resources, including gold, uranium, and other strategic minerals. Mali is a former French colony, and you'll remember France recently led a military intervention that managed to quell an Islamist insurgency in the north. President François Hollande's key presence at the inauguration ceremony Thursday seen by some as a fresh beginning rather than an end to the French involvement in Mali. Now, Kate Parkinson now joins us live from Paris for more analysis of the situation in Mali. Kate, looking at some of the background in Mali, we've got an economy in tatters, we've got poor infrastructure and, of course, separatists in the north. Are these some of the challenges the new president's going to have to deal with going forward?
They most certainly are, and as you've already illustrated, it is a very long list of challenges that President Keïta faces as he tries to move Mali out of this period of political turmoil. If we start with possibly the biggest and most pressing challenge for the new president is national reconciliation, and President Keïta has said that this will be his top priority. I was in Mali during the election period and spoke personally to Keïta during the campaign period before the first round of the elections, and he said this would be his #1 priority. He will plan to organize a meeting on national reconciliation, which brings together all the the stakeholders and paves a way for dialogue and reunification. This really will be his most important challenge as he moves Mali forward. And this was illustrated just earlier this month when we saw clashes between the Malian army and Tuareg separatists on the border of Mauritania. And this was the first time clashes had broken out since a peace accord was signed earlier this year, which paved the way for these elections. But it just shows how sensitive this peace accord is and how difficult the national reconciliation process will be. But as you say, this is just one of many challenges. The economic recovery will be something the new president has to address, and very quickly. The economy was really brought to a standstill as a result of the instability in Mali, and this is something that will have to be addressed. International aid will help, but that goes hand in hand with tackling corruption, which has been endemic in Malian politics for a long time now. So many challenges for the new president as he tries to move Mali forward and put this period of difficulty behind.
Now, let's have a look at what France plans to do with regard to their role in Mali. They, of course, were involved in the military campaigns to do with Islamist insurgents in the north. Going forward, what is France doing in Mali? We've indicated that this is a new beginning rather than any sort of withdrawal.
Well, firstly, France will continue to have a military presence in Mali. There has been a withdrawal of troops, but the drawdown has been slow, and the current expectation is that France will keep at least 1,000 troops in Mali indefinitely to support the UN peacekeeping force that is in the process of taking over the stability, maintaining the stability of Mali. So there will still be a military presence to provide support to the UN forces. There really is two ways of looking at France's current position in Mali, and certainly François Hollande, the French president, does take the pride position in Bamako today at this inauguration ceremony. There are two ways of looking at it. On the one hand, you can see Hollande's presence there as a way of saying mission accomplished. France did what it set out to do and is now passing over the baton to President Keita and congratulating Mali as it moves forward into this new period of democratic rule. Or, as you said earlier, actually, there is the argument that could be said this marks the beginning of a new era of French involvement as opposed to the end. And France does have a lot of interests in Mali. Certainly, you mentioned some of them already. Mali is rich in minerals. There is uranium in the area. There is prospects for oil explorations in northern Mali. And certainly France does have a stake in this. And so there is some people who would suggest that today was never about handing Mali back to the Malian people, but more about cementing France's role in a future Mali.
All right, Kate, thanks very much. We'll leave it there for the moment. We're speaking there to Kate Parkinson in Paris, giving us some insights into the inauguration of Mali's new president this Thursday. Now, we have a look at a developing story from Egypt, which we're closely following. Heavy gunfire was heard on the outskirts of Cairo as security forces attempted to take control of an area where 11 policemen were killed in a militant attack last month. For the latest, let's now go to our correspondent, Adil Marouhi, who is live in Cairo. Adil, looking at some of those developments just outside Cairo today, what is the latest from there?
Well, basically, it seems that the situation has calmed tremendously at Kurdassa area at the outskirts of Greater Cairo. The police security announced the arrest of 48 militants, including 3 of them who were part or accused of the attacks on the police station in Kurdassa 3 weeks ago that left 11 officers dead, including the chief of the police station of Kurdassa. 9 police officers were injured, 1 was dead. He was the deputy security manager of Giza Governorate. This is generally the total number of casualties, but the government seems to continue its crackdown on the area. There are more armored vehicles and troops being called for backup on there, despite the calm that has been there for at least 2 hours now. But also the government wanted to send a message that it has a stronghold over security in Egypt, and it announced that it will decrease curfew hours starting Sunday to become only 5 hours instead of 7, except for Fridays, which is the longest curfew hours from 7 o'clock in the evening until 6 o'clock in the morning, because mainly the protests organized by the Anti-Coup Alliance, the group of Muslim Brotherhood members and their supporters who are still trying to protest against the ousting of President Mohamed Morsi.
All right, Adil Marouki, they're live in Cairo. Now, let's just give you some background around what's been happening just outside Cairo in the last 24 hours. Troops, of course, backed by helicopters, have now surrounded a town outside Cairo. That, according to Adil Marouki, has now calmed to some extent. They were there around suspected Islamist stronghold. Now, Egypt's official news agency, MENA, says the move comes, of course, after the killing of a senior police officer. The officer, who was an aide to Giza city's police chief, was shot dead when militants opened fire on security forces deployed to that town of Kardassa, and that was to drive off suspected militants. Kardassa has also witnessed a brutal assault on security forces last month when heavily armed suspected supporters of ousted President Mohamed Morsi killed 15 police officers and mutilated their bodies. The attack appeared to be in retaliation of security forces' violent crackdown on pro-Morsi protest camps where hundreds of people were killed. Now, for more analysis on that situation, we speak to Sami Rashid in Cairo. He's a political researcher at Al-Ahram organization. Welcome to Africa Live. Now, looking at these developments, all fingers point to the Muslim Brotherhood and the pro-Morsi camp on these attacks. Does it mean they've changed strategy from sit-ins and protests and have now moved towards violence?
No, it's not necessary that, because we don't know up till now if Muslim Brotherhood they are the armored or they are the elements that making violence today or not. Secondly, we know that there are many amounts, there are a lot of amounts of weapons that entered to Egypt during the past 2 years. So many kinds or many levels of the Egyptians have weapons and different levels of weapons now, starting from the normal citizen, not necessarily the MB or the Salafist or the Islamic groups in general. So we can decide up till now that the Muslim Brotherhood or even that Morsi supporters, that they are responsible for this violence, especially that in Kardassa itself, at this point, there was a big event about 1 month ago. It was a problem, it was a normal problem between a family and that policeman that was killed because he was accused to kill a young man in this area. So his family, the killed man family, went there and killed the policeman. I mean that there are another problem in Kardassa, especially not political necessarily.
All right, we've got to end it there. We're running out of time. We're speaking there to Rashid, or rather Sami Rashid, a political researcher at Al-Ahram organization, just giving us some insight into what's happened in Kardassa, explaining that it may not necessarily be a political situation. Well, let's go to a quick break, coming up shortly. Descent into chaos. Villagers in Central Africa now form self-defense groups as violence rages. Welcome back. Now, villagers from several areas in the Oham region in the Central African Republic have been fleeing recent deadly violence. Since the ousting of former President Francois Bozizé Seleka, ex-rebels have been blamed for much of the chaos. Several villagers have now formed self-defense units.
Deserted streets and burnt roofs of destroyed neighborhoods are a stark reminder of the violence that has recently unfolded in this Central African town. Residents have fled in different directions following the increasingly sectarian conflict between the area's Christian majority and fighters from the former Seleka rebel alliance, who are largely drawn from the country's Muslim minority. But Christian vigilante groups are springing up, bent on defending their villages from further atrocities. I'm just a child, but my parents and brothers were killed by the Seleka. I want to die fighting. That way, I will have my revenge.
With Christians, we live in peace, but anti-Balaka came out of nowhere and started to attack the Muslims. Which is why Seleka's people from Korompoko came to pick us up and took us back to where we sleep in a school in Bosangoa. I lost my husband and all my belongings.
Bosangoa is situated in the heartland of supporters of former President Francois Bozizé, a Christian, and current President Michel Jotodia, who is the first Muslim to hold the position. 6 months after the coup, the picture remains bleak, with the reports of widespread rape, weapons proliferation on the rise, and Jotodia declared he was disbanding the rebel alliance that brought him to power last Friday. But residents in Bosangoa say fighters remained active.
We suffer in our own land, and being man, we cannot tolerate it. That's why we fight. We fight against Seleka's men. Right now, we are fighting, and we want the last president back.
The humanitarian situation is also getting increasingly dire. A number of NGO workers trying to improve conditions are also being targeted.
When we went to look for victims, Seleka's men threatened us, which is why we had not had the opportunity to go on the ground. It is thanks to the arrival of FOMAC in the city that we worked more peacefully.
At least 100 people have lost their lives in recent clashes. This escalation of violence poses new problems or threaten to further destabilize the country. Robert Soy, CCTV.
In other news from across the continent, former Libyan President Muammar Gaddafi's son, Saif al-Islam, is expected to join 37 officials of the former government for a pre-trial in Tripoli on Thursday. The 38 accused face charges of murder and crimes allegedly committed during the 2011 civil war. According to Libyan Prosecutor General, Gaddafi's son will be facing an indictment chamber on Thursday at Tripoli Criminal Court, along with former spy chief Abdullah al-Sanusi. The hearing will not be open to the public. Gaddafi's son's been held by a militia group that captured him in the western mountain town of Zintan as he was fleeing to neighboring Niger. Elsewhere, lawmakers in Nigeria's lower house exchanged blows on Tuesday over the presence of a splinter group of the ruling party in parliament. One member of parliament appeared to angrily poke her finger in the face of a colleague, while another legislator was seen grabbing a chair in an attempt to hit a fellow lawmaker. The row was apparently sparked by the visit of Kawu Baraje, the chairman of a dissident faction of the People's Democratic Party, and several state governors loyal to him. The PDP party, which has controlled Nigeria's presidency since a return to civilian rule in 1999, has found itself in unfamiliar territory recently, rocked by infighting and facing a stronger opposition. And finally, the South African township of Manenberg has seen an increase in gang-related violence in recent months. Residents say fear within the community has reached unprecedented levels. The latest episode in the turf war has seen 16 schools temporarily shut down, keeping 12,000 children at home for 2 days. Search operations take place daily, with police hunting Manenberg's 1,000 most wanted criminals, those suspected of offences ranging from murder to drug possession. It's estimated that at least 1 out of every 3 people in Manenberg is using drugs. Now, the ICC trials continue amid opposition from a number of African states. Just looking at that, who suggest the cases had been referred back to Kenya. Now, the International Criminal Court trials against Kenya's Deputy President William Ruto and former radio journalist Joshua Sang are continuing in The Hague, but President Judge Chili Ebowe Osuje has directed that proceedings will now be held in closed doors for the first witness. The judge has warned against revealing the identity of protected prosecution witnesses. He says revealing the identity of protected witnesses is a prosecutable offense.
Bloggers, social media members or participants, and their web hosts are particularly called upon to desist from doing anything that would reveal or attempt to reveal the identity of protected witnesses, or to engage in secondary dissemination of such wrongful and illegal information. Such conducts will be investigated and the culprits will be prosecuted.
Now, as mentioned earlier, the ICC trials continue amid opposition from a number of African states who suggest the cases be referred back to Kenya. And at a press conference in Beijing, China's foreign ministry spokesperson Hong Lei says the African voices should be heard and respected.
We've noted that the Kenyan public have different opinions about Ruto being tried at the ICC. Many African countries have objected to this. At the AU summit this May, the African Union decided that the case should be handed back to Kenya. Both President Uhuru Kenyatta and Vice President William Ruto were democratically elected leaders. We hope the international community will respect the people's choice and listen to the views of the AU and African countries.
Now, coming up in Biz Africa.